You know, the most striking truth about Hope Loop exploitation is that it doesn't work by making you believe things are good. It works by making you believe they are just about to become perfect. We usually assume that people leave when things get bad, right? But in these high-pressure dynamics, your own biological drive for resilience, for optimism, is actually used against you. It turns a never-ending supply of potential into a psychological cage, one that keeps you anchored right in the middle of a painful present. Why do you stay with someone who treats you poorly just because you see the good in them? Well, this is the core paradox of what we call aspirational suspension. That exact moment your desire for a happy ending becomes the mechanism of your own psychological capture. It's one of the most confusing and, honestly, painful dynamics any of us can experience. And it's so subtle. It's this powerful process where our very best qualities, our hope, our optimism, our ability to forgive, are weaponized and turned against us. So that's the big question we're going to unpack today. How does something as beautiful and vital as hope become the very bars of a prison? Well, the answer lies in a predictable, almost scripted pattern that directly targets the way our brains are wired to think about the future. Okay, so to really get this, we'll start by defining what this hope cage is and talk about the people who build it. Then we'll break down the cycle itself and get into the neuroscience behind why it's so darned effective. And then, most importantly, we'll look at how you can start to reclaim your own timeline and use your hope as fuel, not as an anchor.
First up, the hope cage. Let's really dig into this central paradox. At the very heart of this cage is a concept called aspirational suspension. Think of it as a cognitive state where your dream of a better future is the exact thing that keeps you stuck right where you are. Your desire for that happy ending, it becomes the lock on the cage door. And the promise of tomorrow is the key, a key that someone else is holding. Now, I want to be super clear about something. This isn't about diagnosing anyone's intent. We're not trying to label people. We are simply exploring a pattern of interaction. It's all about how our brains can misinterpret future faking, the act of constantly promising a future that never shows up, as actual real growth in a relationship. Okay, Section 2, Architects of the Mirage. So, how does this environment even get built in the first place? At the core of all this is a concept from behavioral science called intermittent satiety. The best way to think about it is, imagine being fed just enough crumbs to keep you sitting at the table. You're starving, but you're always believing a full-course meal is just about to be served. You're kept in this state of near-constant hunger, but you're given just enough to make you keep waiting. And this pattern isn't just in one place. You see it everywhere. You see it in startups that are fueled by the promise of equity down the line. You see it in family dynamics that are built on that phrase, one day we'll be close. And of course, you see it in relationships where a new, big promise always seems to push back that moment you are finally ready to leave. This right here, this illustrates the fundamental switch that happens in your brain. Healthy interactions are based on reality testing. You're focused on current data, and you judge people by their actions. But the hope loop shifts you. It pulls you over into anticipatory suspension. And suddenly, your focus is hijacked by a promised future, and you start judging entirely by potential, not by the reality in front of you. And this whole shift is anchored by a really powerful belief we call the potential hook. It's that feeling you get, after a huge apology or a grand promise, where you think to yourself, yes, this is the real them. This good version is who they truly are. That one little glimpse becomes the anchor for all of your hope. The result of all this is this really disorienting feeling that has a name, chronostatic vertigo. Chrono for time, static for unchanging. It's that dizzying, almost physical sensation of being completely stuck. You're constantly waiting for a next week or a next month that feels like it's been just around the corner for years. Time itself starts to feel warped, almost manipulated. So the end result of this whole process is a systematic recalibration of who you are. You go from being an active person, someone with your own goals, to becoming a waiting subject. Your entire focus shifts from your own life to securing that promised payout from someone else. And in that very moment, your beautiful, powerful hope, it becomes a leash. Okay, Section 3, the exploitation cycle. Let's look at the predictable 3-act pattern that keeps this whole thing running. The cycle unfolds in 3 really distinct stages, and each one is designed to lock you in even deeper. It starts with creating a blueprint, it's maintained by a sudden crisis, and it gets reset with just a tiny little glimpse of the original promise. So it all starts with the blueprint phase. This is where your deepest desires are identified and then mirrored right back to you. It makes you feel finally understood.
But what's really going on is a test of your optimism threshold. They're basically gauging just how much hope you're willing to invest in their vision of the future.
Then, just as that promise seems like it's within reach, boom, the crisis throttle. I want you to notice this key phrase, I wanted to, but. That little linguistic pivot is specifically designed to trigger your empathy. And just like that, the focus is no longer on their broken promise, it's on you supporting them through their brand new crisis.
And now for the final, most crucial step, the micro-sighting. Just when you're absolutely exhausted, when you're ready to walk away, they offer a small taste of that original promise, a single grand gesture. It's not the full thing, but it's offered as proof that the dream is still alive. Your brain latches onto that feeling of relief, and just like that, you're locked right back into the cycle.
All right, section 4, the brain on almost. Let's get into the science of why this trap is just so incredibly effective.
So what's the motivation behind all this? It really boils down to something called zero-cause compliance. See, by controlling your hope for the future, they get leverage over your actions today, all without ever having to actually do the hard work of changing themselves. It's maximum control for minimum effort. This table shows how perfectly the two sides of this dynamic fit together. The controller's motivations, things like temporal sabotage, perfectly exploit our own cognitive vulnerabilities, like our deep-seated need for a story to have a satisfying ending. Each motivation targets a specific and very human tendency.
And let's talk about that dopamine. Our brains are wired in this fascinating, almost counterintuitive way. The anticipation of a reward can release more of that pleasure and motivation chemical, dopamine, than actually getting the reward. It's the hunt, it's the almost, it's the nearly there that is so incredibly addictive. This is the exact same brain mechanism that drives gambling addiction, and the Hope Loop plays it like a fiddle.
And then you've got the psychology. As humans, we're storytellers, and we hate an unfinished story. There's a name for this, the Zygarnik effect. Our minds just stay fixated on incomplete tasks or narratives, and this makes us really vulnerable to the sunk cost fallacy. We've invested so much time, so much energy, that leaving feels like quitting right before the miracle. We just need to see how the story ends, even if living through it is agony.
Okay, section 5, reclaiming your timeline. Now, I know this might all sound a bit bleak, but here's the good news. Awareness is the first step to freedom. So let's get to the most important part. What can you actually do? Here are 2 really powerful tools to help you take back your timeline.
The first tool is the evidence audit. Now, this isn't about blame, it's about pure observation. You unemotionally separate real, tangible action from what we can call ambient noise. That's all the excuses, the stories, the sudden crises. The goal is just to see if this so-called potential is actually just stagnation in disguise.
So here's how it actually works. Step 1, you identify the promise. Let's say it's "will be close." Step 2, you identify the actual action. In this case, maybe it was avoidance or just silence. And step 3, you identify the ambient noise that was used to justify the gap, like "I'm just so busy." When you lay it out this clearly, the pattern becomes undeniable. You're simply comparing words to data.
The second tool is called hard deadline awareness. This is where you set a private, personal, internal exit date. This is not an ultimatum you give to them. It is a commitment you make to yourself. It's a date in your calendar by which the promised action has to be real or you walk. And this is critical. This deadline is non-negotiable no matter what new emergency suddenly pops up.
Both of these tools are powered by one single core realization, an affirmation you can tell yourself over and over: I am the only one who defines my timeline. Just internalizing that one idea is what breaks the cycle. It's the act of taking back ownership of your own future.
And finally, our key takeaway: transforming hope into fuel, not an anchor.
So, let's bring it all together. The most dangerous cages aren't made of steel. They're made of the promise of tomorrow. But real change doesn't need a big marketing campaign. It just shows up in today's actions. Your mind is your own private territory, and awareness is your best defense. And remember, you do not have to wait for the miracle to be whole.
So I'll leave you with a final question for you to reflect on. When you look at the important dynamics in your own life, are you judging the situation by the tangible fruit it's producing today? Or are you still waiting for a harvest that was promised for a tomorrow that never seems to arrive?
Because in the end, it really all comes down to this one simple truth. Hope is a beautiful, necessary fuel that propels us forward. It gives us the energy to build, to create, to become better people, but it makes a terrible, terrible anchor.